This add-on that I'm testing is called Bildeform and it makes bas-reliefs from images and 3D models. I'm just looking at some new features in the 2.5.1 version. My previous video had been on version 2.5.0, which had introduced the new convolutional mode generation. He also added some new modes, so there's some other things to test. This works for Blender 4.2 to 5. I've got Bildeform installed and I'm using Blender 5.0.1 here. I was just testing it with the generate with image. I chose to test it with this image. This is an image I found in the Great Book of Dragon Patterns, which is written by Laura S. Irish. I thought it was a really nice design. I don't have any affiliation with the book that I found this in. I do recommend it if you'd like to find some nice designs that you could use in craft or CNC or woodworking. Laura S. Irish is a very well-known woodcarver and has written lots of books on different subject matter. So I took a picture of it with my iPad and then I went over the lines in Procreate. Then I shaded it using Clip Studio Paint, just using simple airbrush tools. The general idea is to make a value study and keep the shading very smooth so that the bas-relief will look nice. I've shaded areas I wanted to push back in depth a bit more here, this tail here and this hand, and I want to bring forward areas that I've shaded lighter. That's the general principle that I wanted to test with the Bildeform add-on, what sort of results I'd get with the different modes. Earlier I generated some results with the Bildeform add-on. I like to mix the height map, the depth map, and make a custom detail layer from the original image to improve the result a bit. I need to make sure the document is 16-bit because if I don't, then the result will be jagged in the 3D. By jagged, I mean it will look like this, and that's not how I want it to be. I want it to be nice and smooth. So this is how an 8-bit image would look as a height map. So first of all, I will drag the height map from the convolutional mode into Affinity, and then I'll drag the depth map that I exported as well. I exported all the maps for this mode, and I've also exported ones for the DGP, the Franco-Caliper, Fuzzy, Kernel, NIDCT, NIDST, and NIFFT. So I'm just confirming that this is a 16-bit document. So it says up here, grey 16-bit, so that's correct. This is the format that the exports are saved to when you export them from Blender with the Bildeform add-on. Another way you can check this is by going to Document Setup, Document Setup. The colour format is grey 16 and the colour profile grayscale D50, so that's correct. The other file I'll need to put in is the image of the dragon with the transparent background, because I can use that to make a mask to mask out the blurred areas from the depth map, because I used this image here to do the depth maps, which is the same image but with a white border around it, and that's just to get more of the details with the add-on. So it's a little trick I've found that would help the result. In order to make a selection from this layer, I need to go to Pixel Selection from Layer. Now I'm going to put these two layers here into a group, and then whilst I'm on the group layer, I'm going to click Mask Layer, and then that's masked that with the selection I had. Now I want to deselect that. I need the background to be black, so I'm going to make another pixel layer here and drag that to the bottom outside the group. Then I need to find the fill tool, and it's going to be the flood fill tool. Then I need black, and I'm going to just click and fill that. I can then use this original image to make another detail layer, which will help the bas-relief result. So I want to go to Pixel, Filters, Sharpen, High Pass. I want to set it right up so it's a nice smooth result, and apply. And then the other thing I want to do is go to Pixel, Filters, Colors, Erase White Paper. Then I'm going to add an FX and Gaussian blur and just do 0.2 just for a subtle blurring so that the result in the 3D software will be slightly nicer. So once I've done that to the original image, I'm going to drag that into the group and then change that to soft light. And I also want to change the depth to soft light. Now I've got this image nicely masked out. I can use this now in a 3D software if I export it, and I can export it as a PNG. Now it's going to use document format for the pixel format and the ICC. It's going to export it as grey 16-bit. You can see that the 16-bit has produced a much smoother result there. The other thing that I can do is make sure it's in linear rec mode or non-color. That's the result for the convolutional. This is the combined DGP result. This is the custom combined for the kernel mode. For the Franco-Caliper height map, I don't think it's going to make a good enough result to compare with here. It's quite fuzzy, there aren't many details. The fuzzy result is also not very good for the details, so I'm not going to compare that one. That would just be quite a flat silhouette of an image there. That's not really going to work well as a bas-relief. This is the NIDST. So height map for this looks quite fuzzy again, but the depth is quite interesting. So it's put a depth on the tail there, but this hand should be in the background and that's quite light, so that's not worked very well there for this image. This mode here is the NIDST, and on first glance this actually looks quite good, so I'm going to try this one. Then I've got this NIFFT. The height map doesn't look quite as good, but it's better than the one before, the one I just looked at, except that the depth doesn't look quite accurate to what I intended in the image, so I'm not going to compare that one either. I've already looked at the convolutional. I've got to look at the DGP, the kernel, and the NIDST. So this is still the convolutional one. I think the convolutional picks up the details really nicely, especially for this image. The uniform depth is very nice. I still quite like the kernel because it gives more of a rounded look to things, so that can be nice. So let's check the DGP one now. This is actually given a lovely result. The depth is still very usable for something like CNC or sculpting. It represents the depth quite well, although I think I would have to do something about this hand here because that's sticking out a bit too much there. The convolutional worked a bit better with that one because everything's more of a uniform height. Now I'm going to see what the NIDST result looks like. Now this looks quite good. Not quite as good as the convolutional, and we've missed a few details here, but it's given quite a nice result nonetheless. It might be useful for a start in sculpting projects because it looks like it's got the depths of the image quite accurate. For example, this tail here, I wanted that going further back in space, and that's definitely happening there. So I think that mode is a nice addition to this add-on. Overall, I still think the convolutional one gives a nice result for images to bas-relief with this add-on. I do actually quite like some of the qualities of this DST, but I'd like to have the detail of the convolutional. I'm going to mix a convolutional height map of the dragon with the NIDST height map of the dragon and see if it produces a nice result that merges the features that I liked from both of them together or not. I'm going to take the height map for the convolutional here and bring that into Affinity. The depth map for this convolutional will probably be the same as the depth map for this one, so it doesn't matter which depth map I use here. So I'm going to bring the height map and the depth map from this file and bring them into Affinity. I've got my snapping settings here. I can arrange my images so they all line up. Now I'm going to bring the depth map in. Now I also need to create a mask and use the original image to add extra details. I have my original image here. I also need the version without the background so I can create a mask for it. I'm going to put these 3 layers here into their own group. And I'm going to add a layer underneath and use the flood fill tool to fill that with black. So with the image without the background, I can create a mask by creating a selection from this layer. So I go to Pixel, Pixel Selection from Layer. Then on this group here, I can click this Mask Layer button and that will generate the mask. Now I want to deselect everything. In order to create the detail layer, I need my original image here. Then I'll go to Pixel, Filters, Sharpen, High Pass, and I set this all the way up to 100 pixels. Another thing I do is go to Pixel, Filters, Colors, Erase White Paper. I put this in this group here beneath the mask, so that will be masked as well. And I'm going to add a Gaussian blur and just 0.2. You can play with these values. I think 0.2 or 0.5 is probably a good starting point. The bigger your document is, the more smoothing you might need. So the first height layer I'm going to leave as normal blending mode. This one above it I set to soft light, and this depth layer I want soft light, and then this layer I'll choose soft light for that as well. So that's mixing the convolutional and the NIDST height map. Now I'm in Blender. This was the convolutional mixed result that I liked, and this is the NIDST result, and I liked the depths of this, but I wanted to add a bit more detail here. You can see here the values are going too bright, so it's being lost completely in that area there. The mixed NIDST and convolutional result fixes the problem here where I'd lost a bit of detail. It also has a bit more of an even height than the NIDST on its own, like the convolutional gives you, but it also adds the depth of the NIDST. Quite like that one. If you like a particular result but you'd like to mix it with different results, that's how you could go about doing that. It might also be worth trying to lower the output white level for the NIDST if you're going to mix it, because one of the problems with it was it blows out the white values so that you lose the details. The convolutional mode is good for overall detail and uniform depth, and the mixed result that I made with the NIDST and the convolutional below it adds more depth but keeps the detail that was in the convolutional. You could try mixing different results as I've shown you how to do. I think my favourite mode is still the convolutional, but the NIDST is an interesting one to have a go with. Thank you for watching.